Why isn't anyone talking about this? Here, check this out.
Today, I'm announcing 3 critical steps that my administration will take to reduce gas prices at the pump. First, the Department of Energy will release another 15 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, extending our previously announced release through the month of December. Independent analysts have confirmed that drawdowns from the reserve so far have played a big role in bringing down oil prices, bringing them down.
Definitely sounds like a politician trying to get votes, huh? But seriously, guys, today's topic is the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is currently at its lowest level since 1983. Now, due to recent elections, President of the United States has been selling oil from the reserve in order to get better prices at the gas pump for the country, hoping to be able to win favor from the voters. However, with the oil sales from the reserve now stopped, we are left with only 372 million barrels of oil, which is about half of its full capacity. This is significantly lower than at any time that we've seen since the reserve was being filled way back in 1983. Now, despite the stoppage of oil sales, the reserve has not yet begun refilling, leaving us in a very precarious position. Now, we used to have like 36 days worth of oil in the reserve, and now we're down to just 18 days. Now, this is not a whole lot, especially if something really big were to pop off, like a major war or a natural disaster that disrupts the supply chain. But what about you guys? What do you think? Are we good? Do you feel safe in your country right now? Drop a quick comment yes or no on that one. Now stay tuned as I'm going to dive deeper into this issue and we're going to explore the potential consequences of the situation, especially to our income streams and our cash flows. Guys, definitely stay tuned. Also, if you own a home, make sure your home is protected. Get your free home warranty quote. There's a link in the description down below. All right, guys. So here's the thing. The U.S. Energy Secretary, she's never worked in petroleum or chemicals or anything like that. She's just a lady who got elected to different offices and now she's the Energy Secretary. Anyway, she was saying it was going to be a real pain in the butt to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve this year. I mean, it's like this administration's a little kid who took apart a toy and can't quite put it back together again. You gotta wonder why they didn't think about that before they emptied out the reserve so quickly. I mean, with a potential proxy war going on in Europe and another one brewing near Taiwan, it's not exactly the best time to be lowering our stockpiles of emergency supplies. So why is it so important for us to have a stash of oil in the US? I mean, we used to be energy self-sufficient. Y'all remember that, right? Well, here's the deal. Most of the oil that we produce in the United States is light and sweet, but our refineries are set up to process heavy sour oil. So we end up exporting a lot of our light sweet oil to China and to other countries. Meanwhile, we need heavy sour oil to produce the gas and diesel that we use here in the US. Now, the heavy sour oil mainly comes from the Middle East, and we import about 8.5 million barrels of it per day. Now, the thing is, we don't produce very much heavy sour oil here in the United States, except for a little bit in Alaska and a little bit in California. But if we get into a conflict with Russia, which is well within striking range of Alaska, we could very well be cut off from that oil pretty fast. And we definitely do not want to rely too much oil from the Middle East, especially with all the political tensions that are going on over there right now. So this is why we need the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is basically a big stash of heavy sour oil that's the right kind of oil for our refineries. But here's the thing, guys. We used to have 36 days worth of oil in reserve, and now we're down to just 18 days. That's not a whole lot, especially if something really bad were to happen, like a major war or natural disaster that disrupts the supply chain. So yeah, it's definitely going to be tough to fill the reserve this year, but we really need to do it like yesterday. Now, with the way that things are looking, other countries seem to be gearing up to gang up on us. Have you guys heard of the BRIC nations? With the Saudis starting to turn their backs on us and drift toward China and the BRICS nations, this is starting to get very, very alarming. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They were initially seen as the world's fastest growing economies. Now they're trying to become an alternative to existing international financial and political forums like the G7. Basically, they want to represent the global South and provide a different model to the G7, which is made up of the most advanced economies like Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, Japan, Canada, the US, and of course the EU. Now, the term BRIC was first coined in 2001 by Jim O'Neill, who was a big shot economist at Goldman Sachs. The first 4 countries had really strong economic growth rates, and the label BRICS was all about being optimistic about their future. Now, some people thought it was a bit of a marketing gimmick by Goldman Sachs, but it grew into something much bigger than that. In 2014, the BRICS countries launched the New Development Bank, which is an alternative to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. They also created the Contingent Reserve Arrangement to support members members who are having trouble making payments. Now, these offers were super attractive to lots of developing and emerging economies that had bad experiences with the IMF's austerity measures. Now, the BRICS Bank is open to new members, and a lot of countries are interested in joining. Now, the most recent economic developments in BRICS member states has been a bit up and down though. China has done really well, but Brazil, South Africa, and Russia haven't been doing so great. India's been growing, but not as fast as China. Now, one thing to note is that the BRICS countries haven't joined in with sanctions against Russia ever since the start of the war in the Ukraine. There's a worry that the BRICS could become more of a political group than an economic one. Some policymakers think that BRICS might be defined by their authoritarian nationalism, meaning countries led by one all-powerful leader/dictator. But Gunther Mayhold from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, SWP, thinks that the BRICS alliance is more about the increased sovereign and autonomous thought rather than conquering the West. He thinks South Africa, India, and Brazil are just looking for better terms. China, on the other hand, seems to be using the platform to push its global political ambitions. The West is keeping a very close eye on this, and they've invited South Africa and India to the G7 summit in Germany in 2022 to show that they're not standing against the BRICS. Our country needs to have a huge reserve right now. If and when we actually go to war with China, we're going to need those reserves. We need to start drilling for oil and start up the refineries. Ultimately, drawing down the SPR was a political decision. I mean, think about it. An administration that has frequently emphasized the importance of reducing carbon emissions is trying to increase oil supplies to bring down rising oil prices, which in turn kind of help keep demand and carbon emissions high. But even though the Biden administration wants to address rising carbon emissions, high gasoline prices cause incumbents to lose elections. So they try to tame gasoline prices even though it contradicts one of their key objectives of reducing carbon emissions. The SPR has now been depleted since President Biden took office from 640 million barrels to 450 million barrels. This depletion is consistent with recent history. Historically, SPR volumes tended to grow during Republican administrations and would fall during Democratic administrations. Pattern has held true ever since 1980. Presidents Clinton and Obama both used the SPR to ease high gas prices around election time, when Republican presidents until Donald Trump added to the SPR. President Trump drew down about 10% of the SPR during his term. President Biden has announced steps to replenish the SPR, likely after fiscal year 2023, and, in my opinion, most likely after the 2024 elections. Now, President Biden's gamble to deplete the SPR in order to fight high oil prices may not hurt him at all. Now, of course, if for some reason we had a true supply emergency and found ourselves needing that oil, it would be looked upon as a huge, terrible decision. Now, according to the report from the U.S. Department of the Interior, the amount of space under lease in the Gulf of Mexico has gone way down over the last 10 years. Oil companies don't want to buy and explore new space until they're pretty sure that there's oil down there. It's just way too expensive to set up those offshore rigs compared to those new shale drilling rigs. Only the big shots like Hess and Shell are still down to invest in offshore drilling. Last November, the Biden administration held an auction for offshore leases, offering companies around 80 million acres of offshore territory for bidding. But only about 1.7 million acres actually got leased, and most of that space might not even produce oil. ExxonMobil snapped up a bunch of shallow land near Louisiana, but analysts think that there's barely any oil left in those parts. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act has settled a long period of uncertainty around federal leasing programs, which, by the way, could bring oil producers back to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, even if all of the auctions move forward, the bill's clean tax credits will probably have a bigger impact than new oil production. But the oil and gas industry's biggest win might be the expanded tax credits for carbon capture technology. That's an area where Exxon and Occidental have made big investments. There's also a permitting bill on the way that could eliminate regulatory hurdles for pipelines and other fossil fuel infrastructure, but that could lead to more pollution in nearby communities. Oh, and there were some provisions that got cut from the legislation last minute, like those that would have increased costs for oil and gas companies to help reduce abandoned wells on federal lands. The Inflation Reduction Act was passed using budget reconciliation, which allowed Senate Democrats to pass it with a simple majority and skip the filibuster. So will President Biden make a move already and wait for the 2024 elections? I'm telling you guys, China may not wait that long. We got to keep an eye on things. But for now, this was today's major U.S. update and daily news report. Biden drawing down our oil reserves to 18 days worth of supply, and our country's making some serious moves behind the scenes. We got to stay ready, guys. Make sure you're always subscribed and keep that notification bell turned turn on. And of course, for the best way to invest in gold, hit the link in the description down below this video. Appreciate you guys watching. Please be kind to one another, and I will see you on the next one.